Call me old fashioned, but I am one to think. And you don't have to agree. And I'm not saying that I'm right and you're wrong. And I hope you don't think that, I'm wrong and you're right. I think that two things can be true at one time. But one, and I'm one to think because I grew up in a time where the what we would call in the leadership program that I run in my day-to-day job being undiscussable. So, politics, religion, all of that stuff. You don't typically talk about that in the workplace. And I'm still one to think that those kind of things should be left outside of the workplace. And again, you don't have to agree with me. And I think we are in a time where people do feel more comfortable, more open to discussing topics like that in the workplace. I have a little bit more of a conservative view when it comes down to talking about such things because I think that it can be very dangerous in the sense where you just don't know who has what opinion in the room. And that can impact how people see you, perceive you. And just because you may not have, even if you have very similar views to people in the room, you may not agree on all things. And some people think that's an opportunity to come to the table and have discussions about it. And some people, some people don't want to have any discussions about it at all. I'm not saying either way is right or wrong. So this video is not about, these HR subject, HR and all this stuff. I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is, outside of just the workplace. And, what I'll say is that you will never find me really talking about that kind of stuff in the workplace. I'm just not going to participate. If other people around me want to talk about it, by all means, just don't look for me to have a discussion about it. I prefer to not engage, not in the workplace. So if you feel like you want to engage, you want to have those conversations, have open dialogue, that's up to you. Have at it. If you are with people who feel comfortable having open dialogue, with having those kind of conversations openly in the workplace, that's your business. So moving on. But what I've noticed is that outside of just the workplace, all over social media, you just see a lot of talking. You see a lot of people talking, giving their opinions. There is a lot of crazy things happening in the world, and it's hard to even digest. It's hard to even wrap your mind around it. When you're processing one event, another one happens, and it's just like, will it all even stop? And so this is not a video to say those people, anybody who is sharing their opinions online, anywhere, need to stop doing that. I mean, we are in a era where people have the means and have the legal right and the freedoms to do so. So have at it. But also with that, I think we're missing something very vital. And this is also something that challenged me because even though, I might have differing views, same views, it doesn't matter. What it boils down to is communication, how we're communicating with people. We have the same views, middle of the road views, completely opposite ends of the views. There is a lack of listening. And in my previous videos, we talk about, especially in the leadership journey, there's going to come a time where you are leading people who are very similar to you, maybe somewhere in the middle of the road, or completely different than you. Your responsibility is to lead them. It doesn't matter even if you like them. personally, your responsibility is to lead them. But how do you do that? How are you able to put your own personal ideologies, views, beliefs aside to be able to lead somebody you might feel completely different about? You see things completely different. You have completely different worldviews about, or different worldviews. And you knew I was going to pull it out, didn't you? You knew I was going to pull out the book. And also, I'm also doing an innovative leadership certification. And we are talking about neuro-linguistic programming. And so I'm not going to get too far into that, because I will say some people, in my research of what it is, it's just like some people feel like it's pseudoscience. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people are like, you can take some of the frameworks and apply it. There is some positivity to it. To me, it's like chew the meat, eat the meat, spit out the bone. So I'm not going to sit here and say all of the concepts that we're covering, in this particular section of my certification, that I am going to just take it all in and apply it, because sometimes, like, for some odd reason, it feels like it's super woo woo and can move into some really interesting areas, which I'm like, how this is leadership. How did we get all the way over here? But hey, I'm also talking about how we model leadership after the ultimate servant leader, Jesus Christ. So maybe they probably like, how are you doing that? So to each their own. But anyways, so during today's class, this particular subject talks a lot about communication and, basically how to connect and interact with other people. It talks a lot about how, our relationship with ourselves, our relationships with other people, like that communication aspect with others and within ourselves, and how we're perceiving things and things like that. So one thing I do want to call out before I touch on a segment in the book is connection begins when the other person feels seen, heard, and understood. And so, like I said, I was challenged with that today, because even though I may not necessarily agree that certain conversations should be talked about in certain places, in the workplace or whatever, somebody feels completely different than me. And you know what? That's okay. But what am I doing to make sure that that person who feels differently than me knows that even though I might feel differently than you, your perspective, your world, your belief is still valid. And so we are now going over to the book. So if you are joining me for the first time, I am reading Shrinking the Integrity Gap Between What Leaders Preach and Live by Jeff and Tara Matson. I recommend this book whether you're an emerging leader, you're an individual contributor, you have an interest in leading at some point, if you're at the top of the org chart, you're at the bottom, you just want to even know a little bit about leadership, or are interested in knowing more about the book. I think it could be for anybody, honestly, just how to be a better person, closing your own integrity gaps, really, honestly and truly. I think this is great. So you don't need to be a leader to read this book. Fantastic. So I'm going to read a portion that's going to lead me into my next point. So I think we should be good as far as like maybe some YouTube things. Hopefully there's no words that are against the policy. So here we go. How important is it for someone to feel heard? The brain sends a warning to the entire body, creating an alert and reactive stance, commonly known as fight, flight, or freeze, for whatever is to come when it senses danger. If a person consistently perceives possible harm, emotional, physical, or mental, he or she will live with a heightened sense of stress. In his 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, Daniel Goleman described a neural hijacking, which is a person's triggered emotional response that is immediate, overwhelming, and out of proportion to the actual stimulus. An important voice in the field of neuroscience is Dr. Daniel Siegel, hopefully I pronounced that right, who coined the phrase interpersonal neurobiology. Siegel explained that through mind sight, we can focus our attention on the nature of the internal world. When we focus on our own thoughts and feelings and those of others, our brains can actually be restructured. Neuroscience has shown that we can grow powerful neural connections throughout our lives as we become more aware of our own thoughts, needs, and emotions. When someone is seen, heard, and understood, that person's brain chemistry literally changes and our bodies begin to calm down. This calming in the brain reminds the entire body that it is safe and can return to rest. The process of mirroring, validating, and empathizing with a person's perspective is a powerful way to engage with this healing process at work and at home, and anywhere really. And we'll speak more on effective listening in the next chapter. Because of my own protection modes and lack of understanding, I used to think that validation was for those weaker people. Then Tara, so this is the man who's speaking's wife. When Tara first shared the purpose of validation with me, as most therapists in training try to enlighten their spouses, her interpretation intrigued me. Validation has nothing to do with me or agreeing with another person's perspective. Validation is about putting on another person's glasses to see how that person might have arrived at his or her conclusions. This understanding was a game changer for me. Out of a desire to live with growing authenticity and integrity, I used to withhold validation from people who shared an opinion different from mine. I erred on the side of honesty. Once freed from my inaccurate definition, I started validating people all around me. The core value index helps us build an effective framework for validating and affirming others' way of seeing the world. By appealing to people's core values, we assume the best about them and recognize who they are regardless of differing opinions, backgrounds, or expertise. So that challenged me because in this scenario, because this person might very well have the ideas and the beliefs that it's perfectly well, good, and right to be able to have these open discussions and dialogues with people, especially when they feel like it's a safe place. And when I saw that perspective, I was like, absolutely, because if I'm around people who I feel safe with, who I have a relationship with, I would assume it's okay to talk about things that really mean a lot to me, especially if I know if it's impacting me on some type of level. And so especially the validation piece, and I was really, really intrigued to read that piece in particular because, I think validation and affirming can kind of be interchangeable. And I'll speak for myself with that. I was glad to know that I can validate somebody else's world, existence, experience, beliefs, thoughts, perspectives, worldviews, ideas, ideologies without having to agree and feeling as though affirming that. Because for me, affirmation is saying, hey, yes, I agree, I support. But validation is, you know what? I may not agree, but I can see how that is important to you. And because it's important to you, that is valuable. And so these are important lessons to learn, especially in this type of climate where it is so volatile. It is so just volatile. What other word is there? Yikes, you know? And not everybody is going to have the same opinion, perspective, ideas as you, religion, any of that. And that's okay, you know, because so many people are drawing a line that we forget about the human aspect. And I understand drawing a line because why I can understand why somebody would want to draw a line and separate from another person or not want to be around another person or not interact or engage with another person because they have different beliefs. But also, are we forgetting about the other human on the other side of that line? Because we don't get to choose who we work with. We don't get to choose who we lead. Sure, would we like to have a company full of people who maybe believe like us? I hope not. Who think just like us? I hope not. Because, yes, these things might be near and dear and close to us. And I'm not trying to, downplay the importance of the issues at hand, especially when we're talking about politics and, religion and things like that. But also, let's not downplay the human. Let's not downplay that the other person on the other side is having a very human experience too. And their world might be completely different than yours. It's probably completely different than yours, but in some ways, in a lot of ways, is very much the same. And so the things that want to keep us separated, the things that are trying so hard to keep us divided, the things that are trying so hard to keep us hating and fighting. But if we stop to think that, you know what? I do have my opinion. I do have my reasons I do have all of my life experiences that have have led me to the reasons why I think and believe the way that I do. But I know that this person does too. And so instead of me treating them like they're not human, let me take a step back and maybe try to understand how they got here. There was a TED talk, and I wish I remembered who it was, And I think it was around communication. I think it was talking about how, you know, how each person is like a book on the shelf. And we should be curious and want to take each person off the shelf and want to read about that book. We cannot just judge it from the cover. I would not have known all of this was in this book from the cover. It's very pretty. I love it. I love the colors, but also the depth that's in this book. We've given up our communication, our willingness to reach across the table, our willingness to just stop. Everybody wants to talk. I don't want to say everybody, that's an absolute. A lot people want to do a lot of talking, not a lot of listening. And could we, if we just stop to brainstorm and stop to think, if we spent more time listening, because I'm not even going to go there. Even just the people around us, we're not all going to be privy to, and when we can be, because we can find anything and everything on the internet. But just starting with the people around us. And again, that may not mean that bridges are built or relationships are healed, but it might give you some perspective. It might open your eyes to how somebody could have formulated their ideas, how they got there, how did they get to point A to point B. So I just love the piece about validating because I know I can use that. I know I absolutely can incorporate that piece in my life because I'm not perfect. I know that I've gotten mixed up with because I may not necessarily agree with certain things that it's never that it's never that I didn't treat somebody like a person or human being, but also there's another layer of just simply offering like a level of humanity to someone that just can enrich somebody's life, especially if you're going to be leading, because this might be all you have to go on. This might be all you have to go on, especially if you've got somebody who is a challenge. You Different ends of the spectrum, couldn't be more different. Don't understand each other, don't have a single, not a thing. But how do you begin to close that gap? there was a piece, another piece, where she was talking about, the connection piece. So first she's saying change starts with yourself. I think we know that on this channel now, if you've been with me. And then we talked about the connection piece earlier. So connection begins when the other person feels heard, feels seen, heard, and understood. That's how you start to build relationships. Okay. And she also said relationships have two things. You've got that communication aspect. So that's when you're able to start to understand, their needs, communicate to their needs, their values, results, desires, and their model of the world. And then also you've got listening, but not just listening, but you're listening on a deeper level. So where are they coming from? Which model of the world they're operating from. So those are the things we want to be thinking about when we are building relationships. So I think that's our challenge, especially in this time. Being Christ followers, there's a lot of there is a lot of darkness in the world happening, and we're to be the light. And so how are we going to be a lighthouse to anyone if our heart is pitch black, if there's no light shining in us? Because we're talking about loneliness epidemics, all kinds of things. So this is very basic to offer someone a very human experience, just so that they know that someone cares for them. And it doesn't need to be in an overly emotional way, but just because you're here breathing air, you're valuable. Because, like I said before, everybody deserves to matter to someone. Everybody should matter to someone. Even the person you hate should matter to someone. They may not matter to you. That's okay. They don't have to matter to you. Okay. Nobody's asking for them to matter to you. But they should matter to someone. So I know for me, my goal is to practice. How can I validate? And it doesn't make, I'm validating you right now. So please feel as though I'm here for you. I'm making space for you. I am validating you. You are heard. You are valued. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to be all that. Just come knowing that, okay, am I open right now? Is my mind, is my heart open to understanding this person? Oh, I don't agree with that. But do they have to know that? Or if they do have to know that, how can I make sure that it's in a way that, hey, I differ, but I can see how I can see how you would feel that way. That makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you guys will join me in doing just a better job of validating. Now that we've got the definition, I think that I'm definitely going to be keeping that in the forefront of my mind, especially with where we are now. And so my name is Tiffany, and on this channel, we are learning to serve ourselves. I was so confident. I was so confident. So my name is Tiffany, and on this channel, we are learning to lead ourselves well so we can serve others better. This is a faith-based channel, and but I teach universal leadership concepts, so everybody's welcome. Hopefully you'll get something from it. Please stick around, watch some of my other videos, and whether you've been leading 30 seconds or 30 years, I believe anybody can get something from it. You might get some lessons, you might get some edification, you might get a little bit of everything. Who knows? We're just going to go with how the Lord leads. And I pray that you'll be back, and please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know where you're from, especially if you are joining the channel for the first time. And we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.